Hi everyone, I'm Jeremy Dickinson. I thank you all for watching. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Philosophy Clips. In this philosophy clip, I will continue my discussion of Judith Jarvis Thomson's classic and landmark 1971 essay, A Defense of Abortion. This is part 2 of my video series on Thomson's paper. Now in part 2, what I'll be doing is talking about the extreme view, what Thomson calls the extreme view and her responses to it. But before I get there, let me see if I can say a few things about what I discussed in part 1 to make sure that we're all on the same page. So what Thomson wants to do in her 71 piece is she wants to argue for the pro-choice position. She wants to argue for what's known as the permissivist position in the abortion debate. She wants to take on some of the really radical views that you find developed by the pro-life position and show that those views fail, those positions fail, and that the pro-choice position is right. When she wants to develop an argument that's going to blow the door open, as it were, for her position. So at the end of last video, I got to a view that, a pro-life view, that is, that Thomson considers and then is able to reject. She rejects by developing the classic violinist argument. So let me just do some recapping on that, just so we're totally clear. So let's call the following pro-life view, the following restrictivist view, either morally or legally, the radical view. Abortions are morally or legally impermissible, even in cases where females are pregnant due to rape. Okay, so the radical view. Obviously, it seems like it's aptly named. Abortions are morally or legally impermissible, even in cases where females are pregnant due to rape. What kind of argument can be adduced for this position? Understanding how one would argue for this position puts us in a position for understanding how Thomson's going to respond to this radical view, the radical view as we're calling it. So here's how it might go. Look, the fetus, however it came about, is a person. As a person, it enjoys the right to life just as much as you and I have the right to life. Thus, it's very serious if you were to kill it, because you'd be violating this very weighty right, the right to life. In cases where a female is considering aborting a fetus, it's really her right to decide that's in question. And we need to compare the right to decide what happens into the female's body with what? The fetus's significant right to life. But of course, the significant right to life is going to outweigh the female's right to decide. The right to decide is likewise significant, but surely it's not as significant as the right to life. It's life after all. Now, a couple different responses are available to Thomson, right? She could say, oh, the fetus isn't a person. So if the fetus doesn't have the right to life, so we don't have to worry about the right to life versus the female's right to decide. The right to decide would trump, right, the continued existence of the fetus, let's say. That's one way that Thomson could go, but she doesn't. That's the way that many pro-choicers had gone historically. Instead of going that route, what she does instead is challenge the claim that the right to life is so weighty always that it's going to outweigh the right to decide what happens into one's body. So the very general challenge to that claim will allow her to say that it's not always the case that the fetus's right to life outweighs the female's right to decide what happens into her body. So how does she challenge the claim that the right to life always outweighs the right to decide what happens into another's body? Well, that's where the violinist case comes in. She develops the violinist case to show, look, in that case, it's either right, the right to life of the violinist, this unconscious violinist that you're forced to be hooked up to, remember, right? Or your right to decide what happens into your body that are at stake. So you have these two rights that we're supposed to be considering. And if the argument that was just run for the radical view is right, then it looks like you'd have to remain plugged in. But that's the wrong result, isn't it? It looks like you'd have every right to unplug in that case. So your right to decide what happens in that case is going to outweigh the violinist's right to life. So then it's just generally not true to say that the right to life always outweighs the right to decide what happens in and to another's body. And then we just apply this to thinking about the argument for the radical view. And that's Thomson's strategy. So the violinist case generates an argument against the radical view. Of course, what we're going to appeal to in thinking about the violinist case is coercion. You're going to say, I was forced. I wasn't asked to be hooked up to this violinist. And that's why I have every right to unplug. Look, if I consented in advance to be hooked up to the violinist, then all bets are off, perhaps. It's going to take a weighty consideration indeed for it to be permissible for you to unplug. But you are forced to be hooked up in that case. And then here's Thomson. And the same thing's true in cases where females are pregnant when they're raped. They were forced to be pregnant. Okay, so that puts us in a prime position to move on to another radical view, but we'll call this one the extreme view. We're following Thomson here. She calls it the extreme view. So let's define the extreme view in the following way. Abortions are morally or legally impermissible, even in cases where the female's life is in danger, medical danger, as a result of the fetus. So here we're supposed to be thinking about cases where it's the fetus's life versus the female's life. So the fetus's life versus the female's life. And here's the thought. They both have the right to life. Thomson's assuming throughout the entire piece that the fetus is a person just like you and I and has the right to life. So in cases like these, in cases where the female's life is in danger as a result of being pregnant, it's going to be the right to life versus the right to life. So hopefully we understand what the extreme view is. Thomson wants to argue against it. How she do so? Well, once again, she considers arguments for the extreme view and then shows that those arguments fail. So one line of argument is, look, there's an important moral difference between killing and letting die. Every case of killing is worse than every case of letting die. So this principle has generality, like the principle that we saw in thinking about the radical view. So every case of killing is worse than every case of letting die. And now consider a case where a female's life is in danger as a result of being pregnant, where it's the fetus's life versus the female's life. If she were to have an abortion, she'd kill. That's the argument. If she were to have an abortion, she'd kill. Alternatively, if she doesn't have an abortion, she would let herself die. But killing is always worse than letting die. So the female can't abort the fetus. That's the line of argument. The first line of argument for the extreme view that we'll discuss. Her response is this. Let's revise the violinist case. And in this violinist case, assume, if you want for argument's sake, that you consented to be plugged in. Just for argument's sake. Here's what she says. Let's read from Thomson. She's really, really good. There you are in bed with the violinist, and the director of the hospital says to you, it's almost distressing, and I deeply sympathize, but you see, this is putting an additional strain on your kidneys, and you'll be dead within the month. But you have to stay where you are all the same, because unplugging you would be directly killing an innocent violinist, and that's murder. Unjustified killing. And that's impermissible. And here's what Thomson says. If anything in the world is true, it is that you do not commit murder. You do not do that which is impermissible. If you reach around to your back and unplug yourself from the violinist or that violinist to save your life. So an intuitive case that serves as a counterexample to the very general killing versus letting die principle that we've added, that was advocated in support of the extreme view. Okay? So revise the violinist case, make it a case where it's a case of killing versus letting die. In that case, it's better to let die than it is to kill. So there's something had to have gone wrong with the principle that it's always worse to kill than it is to let die. But some might develop a different kind of argument. It doesn't rest on this killing versus letting die principle. And here she considers third parties. So it's like a third party argument. The first argument for the extreme view is the killing versus letting die argument. This is the third party argument, we can call it. So here's what she writes. The main focus of attention in writings on abortion has been on what a third party may or may not do in answer to a request from a woman for an abortion. This is in a way understandable. Things being as they are, there isn't much a woman can safely do to abort herself. So the question asked is what a third party may do, and what the mother may do, the female may do, if it is mentioned at all, is deduced almost as an afterthought from what is concluded from what third parties may do. Right? So the idea here is, let's figure out whether or not females can have abortions in cases of these medical emergencies by thinking about what doctors can do, the relevant third parties can do. And if doctors can't perform abortions in these cases, then females can't have abortions in these cases. Okay? The third party argument. And the thought is that third parties can't perform abortions in these cases. Why? Because they have to choose between two equal rights, the right to life of the fetus versus the right to life of the female who's in medical danger. The doctor can't rationally choose one over the other. So then, even in cases where the female's life is in danger, medical danger as a result of being pregnant, abortion is thereby, you've guessed it, impermissible. So a different line of argument doesn't invoke the killing versus letting die distinction. How does Thomson respond to this argument? She develops a rapidly growing child case. So obviously the violinist case is a wonky case. This case is even wonkier, but if it's successful, it refutes the argument that's just been developed, the third-party argument for the extreme view. Suppose you find yourself trapped in a tiny house with a growing child. I mean a very tiny house and a rapidly growing child. You are already up against the wall of the house, and in a few minutes you'll be crushed to death. The child, on the other hand, won't be crushed to death. If nothing is done to stop him from growing, he'll be hurt. But in the end, he'll simply burst open the house and walk out a free man. Now, I could well understand it if a bystander were to say, there's nothing we can do for you. We cannot choose between your life and his. We cannot be the ones to decide who is to live. We cannot intervene. But Thomson concludes, but it cannot be concluded that you too, the person under attack, that you cannot attack it, the rapidly growing child, to save your life. Okay? So what Thomson's trying to say here is a mistake to say that what a female can do in cases where her life is in medical danger as a result of being pregnant can be read off just merely by thinking about what a third party can do. That's a mistake. Even if we suppose, for argument's sake, that the third party can't choose between the fetus and the female, even if we suppose that that's true, Thomson argues that a female can decide to have an abortion. She can have an abortion on herself. She can get rid of the fetus on her own if necessary. Just like in the rapidly growing child case, even if it turns out that a bystander walking by, right, can't choose between you and the rapidly growing child, you'd have all the right in the world to save your own life. So likewise, in cases where the female's life is in danger, she can save herself. So that's her response to the third-party argument for the extreme view. Now this leads proponents of the extreme view, at least some of them, to ante up and develop a revised version of the extreme view. They maintain, look, it's permissible for females, so either legally or morally permissible, for females to have abortions in cases where they're being pregnant has put their lives in danger, in serious medical danger. Only if, so they give this necessary condition, only if they perform the abortions on themselves, because third parties, like, they can't rationally choose between these two rights to life. Right, so you see the revised view? So abortions, this is a radical view. The revised extreme view. Got ahead of myself there. The revised extreme view says the following. It is morally or legally permissible for a female to have an abortion in cases where her life is in medical danger as a result of being present, only if she performs it on herself. third parties can't come in then and perform them on them. What's Thomson's response to this argument? Well, the argument fails. The argument fails. What's the basis for thinking that third parties can't come in and choose between these different rights to life? Well, just like thinking about the rapidly growing child case, the bystanders walking by, I can't choose between you and the rapidly growing child. I'm sorry, you have to fend for yourself. Perhaps it's thought that similarly, doctors can't come in and say, the fetus has the right to life, you have the right to life, I choose you. Right? Or I choose the fetus. They can't. The argument is because it's the right to life versus the right to life. Thomson thinks that this is pretty absurd. Here's what she notes. She gives us another case. Call it the coat case. She notes, certainly lets us see that a third party who says, I cannot choose between you, like the bystander in the rapidly growing child case, is fooling himself if he thinks this is impartiality. So impartiality is when you're being unbiased. You're not able to choose between either side, so you don't. If Jones has found and fastened on a certain coat, which he needs to keep him from freezing, but which Smith also needs to keep from freezing, then it is not impartiality that says the following, quote, I cannot choose between you, end quote, when Smith owns the coat. Women have said again and again, this is my body, and they have reason to feel angry, reason to feel that it has been like shouting in the wind. She continues, Smith, after all, is hardly likely to bless us if we say to him, quote, of course it's your coat. Anybody would grant that. Grant that it is, but no one may choose between you and Jones, who is to have it. And Thomson's going to say, that's absurd, because Smith owns the coat. Jones just happened to somehow get it. No fault of Smith that Jones ended up getting it. But third parties may well help Smith get his coat back from Jones, even though, guess what? What'll happen to Jones? He'll die. It's the right to life versus the right to life, after all. But a third party may come in and say, look, even though it's a right to life versus the right to life, it's Smith's coat. He owns it. So I'm going to help him get it back. Likewise, when medical professionals come in and they see the right to life of the fetus versus the right to life of the female, it could be granted that they both have the equal right to life, just for argument's sake. That's what Thomson does. But look, the female owns her body in which the fetus is living. And so the medical professional can help the female. And that challenges this revised extreme view. So that concludes Thomson's discussion of the extreme view, the revised extreme view. We see that her responses are chock-filled with cases and responses to arguments. Hopefully it's all clear. If you have any questions, be sure to comment below and let me know. Thank you all for watching. See you all next time. Bye-bye.